All right, welcome everybody. Thank you for being here today. So we're going to be talking about innovating with the TRUSTe Responsible AI Certification. So in this webinar, we're going to cover a few things. We're going to talk about how compliance can play a role in the build, deployment, or use of AI systems. We're going to talk about how to model accountability and transparency, how to utilize existing processes that you may already have in place with maybe with your data governance, approaches to AI governance, and then we're going to talk about the responsible AI certification. So let's go ahead and just jump right in. And I want to just start off with a question for our panelists here, which is, what are the data use challenges and considerations for companies using AI?
Yes, when you plan your AI project, among other things, think about questions: what data is required? What about the data that is collected? What are the expected outputs from your AI system? Is it personal data or is it non-personal information? If personal, most likely data privacy, data protection regulations will apply. If you need to use sensitive personal information, ensure that you comply with applicable regulations. Know that different jurisdictions define sensitive personal information differently. Also, organizations should address, should think about how you want to, if you don't need sensitive personal information, maybe it could be a good idea to not to use sensitive personal information because it may trigger additional requirements depending on the jurisdiction you operate in or jurisdictions you operate in.
Yeah, that's great. Good questions to ask if you are, just about the data that you're using. But, what about for your organization, Jessica? I know the challenges of AI are not limited to those related to, personal data.
Yeah. So in the case of our organization, there's not really an end user to our AI, and there is no PII content within our AI itself. So really, it's more of the data burden of sufficiency of data for training our models, because then they are then in turn going to process billions of records and have the burden of accurate data that's going to be delivered to our clients. So sufficiency of data to train our models, and then also making sure that the data we're collecting after the fact on monitoring those models really continues to help us retrain and evolve our models to stay accurate. Because within digital advertising, it's ever changing, right? The landscape is ever changing, consumption is ever changing. So there's a good chance that your models will continue to be out of date and or need evolution of training and or upkeep. So really making sure the data points you collect from a monitoring after the fact are really critical as well.
Yeah, I think in digital advertising, in that space especially, nothing is static, right? I mean, you're constantly growing, moving, evolving, changing. It's a lot to keep pace with. So, and also, yeah, an incredible amount of volume in that space, in that industry, right? Well, so given those factors, that you've both sort of articulated, how then do you approach AI governance, given that you have these challenges of, privacy challenges, but also you have like volume, accuracy, training, et cetera. How do you approach that? Let's start with you, Jessica.
Well, I mean, again, it's an ever-changing environment. I think AI standards continue to change and evolve and be introduced. So really, I don't think it's a set it or forget it or a one size fits all of those terms, right? For us, we kind of set out some structure around our processes and procedures to develop, train, and monitor our various machine learning models, and really work to stay up to date on standards and requirements that are coming out, and then in turn incorporate those, work with our product leaderships and data science organizations to build those back into the product roadmaps and development life cycles to make sure we're staying up to date. I also think a critical part for us and building out that AI governance program has been seeking out certifications, right? So we all know we can study as much as we want and take a test and feel really confident we did good, but until that teacher grades it and tells us ultimately what our grade is, we never really know how well we did. So similarly, as you're defining an AI governance program, you want to make sure you're putting in responsible practices, but then seeking out something like the responsible AI certification really gives you that opportunity to kind of assess your AI governance program, assess compliance with standards that are out there, and help you evolve that AI governance program with the standards and frameworks that are out there, and really then fine-tune documentation, add in additional control points within your processes, really help strengthen that overall AI governance program.
Yeah, and I noticed you mentioned a number of different roles there, and we're going to get to roles later in AI governance, but it involves a lot of people. So Maciek, what about you? I know you've done a lot of work around governance generally.
Yeah, I mean, something that I would like to add to what Jessica has mentioned is what we've been seeing, there has been a focus on interoperability. So when you think about, how can you prepare yourself better for, upcoming AI regulations or emerging AI regulations, think about areas such as OECD AI principles. They're really a base for most of the frameworks. Think about risk-based approach. It is also incorporated in many frameworks. There are more extensive requirements for AI systems that pose higher risk for individuals. Some regulations even include a set of prohibited AI uses. Think about human oversight when the decisions may pose adverse legal or similarly significant effects. Many frameworks will require, some form of human oversight. Conducting risk assessments is also one of those areas that you should be thinking about. Depending on different frameworks, there will be a requirement of conducting risk assessments. There also may be requirements for conducting some more, technical assessments. Another area is inventories. Think about records of processing activities, inventories of AI systems. And also what is really important is documentation, including documenting your decisions that you're making. There is a strong emphasis on documenting. And what I'm what I'm talking about is not only documenting how the AI systems work, but also or a catalog of approved tools and services within the organization, but also, as I said, documenting your decisions that relate to governance.
Yeah, I think when in doubt, around certain decisions you make, right? If you're not sure, it's good to document maybe how you arrived at that decision so you can defend it. But we talked about frameworks a little bit, and I know there are a lot of frameworks out there in not just AI, but privacy, cybersecurity, and some people even use GDPR as their framework. There's a lot of variety, and those that doesn't necessarily fully overlap with AI frameworks. And so how important, I guess, is it to have a framework? And Jessica, like in integral science, do you have a framework, a singular framework? Do you use that method at all?
So we don't align with a singular external framework of any sort. I think we took a more hybrid approach where we kind of borrowed or aligned with a number of different frameworks that exist out there. And I think that will continue to evolve as well, right? So as we've grown the AI governance framework within our organization, right, it does look for key components. And I think those certifications help really push the requirements, specifically, like Maciek said, around documentation. So I think in corporate America today, we're pretty good at risk and control and making sure there are processes. But I think where a lot of companies fall down and where a lot of those certifications reinforce the requirement for documenting of how you made your decisions to ultimately, come to terms with your machine learning models, how you continue to evolve those machine learning models, what are the processes for development, process and procedure documentation, even documenting, we were talking earlier in a while about this idea of the requirement to document how your people are sufficiently trained and knowledgeable in order to support those AI functions within the organization. So I think starting off and putting, your own flavor of a framework in place, or even following one of the formal frameworks out there, but then seeking out those certifications to kind of reinforce some of the additional things that really are critical to having a fully fleshed out and mature AI framework and governance program.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree completely. And I think, having that framework, if you can put one in place or have one, it allows you to be more proactive than reactive. Because as we know, regulations will continue to change and evolve and grow and increase. But for those, folks who say, well, AI is maybe not, or AI governance isn't a priority right now. How would you all respond to that? Why prioritize AI governance and compliance? And just a quick note before you answer that, we're not presenting a deck, but we will in a little while. So we're just discussing right now. So why prioritize AI governance and compliance for those who are maybe want to be first, get their AI out and are first to market?
Yeah, I mean, I will start with, following up on what Jessica and I have been talking, documentation. So, you should have the structure and documentation to use AI to make sure that the use of AI within your organization is consistent. Not having that may even hinder growth and innovation within the organization. So documenting that is extremely important. There are, regulatory risks. Not having AI governance in place puts an organization in a higher risk of not adhering to existing and emerging privacy regulations. There is a organizational risk without the AI governance. There may be no defined roles and structure. That's something that we've been also talking about. It may be without the structure and the roles, it may be challenging to address, upcoming issues effectively. Maybe there are some issues that you don't even know about. Right. And there is also the very important aspect of public trust. Not having AI governance in place can erode public trust in your organization. A tip from me, you could slowly build out your governance around risk management framework and adjust it to the size of your organization, industry you operate in, and data you use. A certification such as the TRUSTe Responsible AI incorporates a risk-based approach that helps companies assess which requirements apply to them in the context of, what they include in the scope of the certification, and etc.
Yeah, and I will add, in terms of building out your governance, when talking about our responsible AI certification, one of the things that we considered, right, is that we know companies are not necessarily going to be in a final state and ready to finish that. And so we preemptively created some resources for folks who want to go through that process, a number of AI, what we call operational templates here, but what they are is AI governance documents. For example, some of them are completely new types of documents. Some are additions to probably existing ones already. So let's take like an acceptable use policy. Your company probably already has that in place, covers a number of things. In addition to that would be around the internal use of AI across your employee base, right? That could be something to add to your acceptable use policy. So we've created a number of templates there to as resources for people to use. But in terms of talking about regulations, I do want to, we're not going to go heavy into regulations because I know there's a lot of resources out there. That screen is blank. But let's talk first about sort of the EU space. So we have the EU AI Act, which we know is finalized. But within the EU AI Act, it also refers to a number of different directives and regulations. I abbreviated some of these because the directive name itself is quite long, but you have, your privacy or data protection related things like GDPR, e-privacy directive. You also maybe have trade secrets, copyright laws, consumer protection laws, product liability, product safety. You've got to think about cybersecurity. There's the Digital Services Act. So there's a number of sort of spokes, let's say, in this wheel. It's not entirely a wheel here, but that are attached to the AI specific regulations, right? So it's not just the AI regulation that you have to be concerned about, although you also have to read or be aware of what's going on there. And also in just the EU space, we sort of mentioned already, but I thought one of the interesting deadlines that's coming up with the EU AI Act is this AI literacy requirements, which are applicable to providers and deployers of AI systems. And that is essentially that your staff that are developing and using the AI have to have sufficient AI literacy to be able to do that. How that will be enforced or how that will be assessed, I think, there's not really guidance on that, but to sort of Maciek's point, earlier, document your decision making. And Jessica also mentioned, like that's one of the things you have to just document, kind of, maybe job descriptions or some other things that you have in place.
Yeah.
So, sorry, go ahead. No, please.
Yeah, and just to add to that, regardless of the privacy or AI regulations you're thinking about, maybe it's a good idea to create the training program and adjust the training program to the roles, because the training you will be delivering will be different, will be different for different roles. And then when the role changes, it also may need to be adjusted. So, different people, different job titles, different teams may need, different levels of the training.
Yeah, absolutely. I imagine engineers will get slightly different training than maybe the privacy folks or customer service folks.
Yeah, or HR, right?
Yeah, right. That's a good one. All right, well, let's take a look at the US. You notice there aren't spokes because one, we don't have a national or federal AI regulation yet. But if you think about AI, if you're using AI, here are some other areas to really think about. You've of course got state privacy laws, and you've also you're going to start to see emerging state AI laws. I think there's at least 19 different states that have some version of an AI law. It's not necessarily a holistic one, but sometimes it just covers different aspects of AI, like automated decision making. But you've got general tort, you got trade secrets, product liability, similarly, Civil Rights Act, the FTC Act. You want to make sure, the FTC has said, they're not going to, they don't need to wait for an AI regulation to enforce. They can use the deceptive practices, and they have already used that against some companies for making statements about what their AI can do around content moderation that it wasn't doing, and they enforced against them for deception. You've got, American Disabilities Act, intellectual property, HIPAA, a number of things, right? And then in the US, you've also, in this outer circle here, you've got these extraterritorial laws. So then you've also got, GDPR and the EU AI Act if you're operating in those marketplaces. So it's really, a lot to take in, and which again, I think reinforces why governance can be really helpful. And there may be some in here that I didn't include that are specific to your industry, right? Every time I talk with a different customer, I learn about some other law that, I've only ever heard that your industry is subject to, and I continue to learn. So there's those as well. Just to, for parity, I put another little note here. 364 days after the AI literacy is required. You have the Colorado AI Act go into effect. Why is that notable? Well, it's just notable because it's the first AI-specific legislation passed in the United States. It is also risk-based like the EU AI Act, but something to keep an eye on. So talking about privacy more specifically, we have a lot of privacy folks here, or maybe folks who are using personal data with your AI. I just did kind of a quick look at GDPR, and maybe you're not using GDPR, you're not applicable to it, but I think it's a good example to see where privacy laws can overlap with AI. So starting at the top, these provisions more specifically regulate AI. While it doesn't mention AI, these are really things that AI does, which is automated decision making. So providing meaningful information about the logic involved. So, some of the articles of GDPR cover that. Of course, you've got data subject rights related to decisions based solely on automated decision making. That's an AI concern. And moving down here, we have provisions related to processing risk or the volume of data. Especially if you have those high volumes. So you've got to look at DPIAs for high risk processing. As you move down, these provisions are really technology neutral. And these are just, these apply to any new technologies you're maybe using where personal data is involved. So all the data protection principles, legal basis, privacy by design, et cetera. I sort of stopped at 30 because I ran out of room, but you could add more. You could add data breach. You could add the requirement to have a DPO, right? Certain large volumes might require you to have a DPO or certain types of processing. So a lot to think about from the regulatory space to incorporate into your governance. What has been your company's approach, Jessica? How do you who's responsible at Integral Ad Science?
I mean, really a layered approach, right? There's no one group within IAS that's responsible for AI. I mean, it starts all the way at the top, right? Senior leadership kind of sets the tone for the vision, strategy, overall risk appetite for AI within our organization. We have an information security committee that really has some oversight of the governance, the technology governance, including AI. And they will meet and consider some of the decision points for AI. I think the core ownership, if you will, of AI within our environment lies with our data science organization and the product leadership organization that helps divvy up the work for data science. Those data scientists are going to be the ones that design, test, monitor, continue to enhance and grow the AI within our environment. But then we also have compliance, right? They play a big role, just more so in the creation of that AI governance, ensuring adherence to those processes and procedures through audit and oversight. We seek out certifications that continue to help have oversight over those processes, stay up to date with regulations that are coming out and help bring those back to the product leadership and data science organizations. So I think there's a lot of people that wear the AI governance hat within IAS. I also feel that it might range by company, especially by size of company, right? If you have a really small company, there might be a singular person that owns it. If you have a huge corporation with 20,000 employees, there's going to be maybe a whole group that is purely responsible for AI, or like IAS, it could be across the entire organization.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting about, your point about the smaller companies, small to medium size, because you're right, it may be one person. And I think even in that instance, let's say you've been chosen, you've raised your hand and you're the owner now. I think it is still good to get the perspective of some different folks within your organization, because they're going to have a different lens on AI. Like I said, engineers are going to think about AI differently. Your internal legal counsel might think about it differently as well. HR is going to, so you need all those perspectives to make sure you're sort of covering all of those bases, and that input can be really valuable as you are building out your governance or trying to make sure that you're meeting some criteria. All right, how are we doing on time? We're okay. All right, so we've talked about, governance and frameworks and some of the regulatory landscape. I do want to dive into accountability and transparency because I think with AI, we often hear it's a black box, what's going on. And I know I've heard questions about how do you do that? How do you demonstrate, accountability or transparency? So, Jessica, what are your thoughts on how to do that, how to model accountability and transparency when it comes to AI?
Yeah, I mean, as I stated earlier, we don't have any end users to our AI. There's no client interaction that are ultimately, they receive the data. There's the burden of giving that trust and transparency to them, but they have no interaction with our AI. We also have proprietary, it's considered proprietary information, right? Like what those machine learning models are doing to ultimately produce those ratings is not something that we want to put out to the marketplace or in specific terms say exactly what's happening, right? So the way that we model trust and transparency is really one by having a strong AI governance program, having some clear and documented processes and procedures around how we develop, test, implement all those things related to AI within our organization. But I think even more impactful and valuable to our clients has been seeking out those external parties to do compliance reviews and or certifications that really provide some additional confidence to our clients that we have responsible AI practices, that we're following our own standards and requirements and processes and procedures, because it really gives them that transparency and then builds that trust without being able to actually dig into the weeds themselves.
Yeah. Maciek, what would you add to that?
Yeah, what I would like to add is, the importance of having internal policies and procedures that, ensure accountable and transparent use of AI internally and when individuals interact with AI. Some of the examples of those documents are AI policy or equivalent or a set of some set of policies. They will be addressing areas such as the purposes and intended uses of AI systems, explanation on, what are the business needs, maybe a catalog of approved tools and services within the organization. So, internal, so the personnel within the organization have this set of tools that are approved and vetted by the organization. Those documents, among other things, should also include standards for AI model performance. And again, documenting and it is important that those documents are communicated internally with the personnel.
So a lot of documenting, I hear.
A lot of documenting, communicating with different stakeholders to yeah.
Well, given that companies probably already have a volume of documents, how do you leverage what you already have, whether it is tools or processes or what else? What else do you leverage? How do you leverage those things?
Yeah, I mean, some of the examples are building your risk assessment based on the tools that you already have, such as privacy impact assessment, or DPIA. They may not be addressing all the areas that you need to address, but you can use them as a base and then adjust them to the needs of the different frameworks, different regulations. You also should be ensuring the periodic reviews of those assessments. And there are a few areas that you can consider when you're building those AI assessments based on the tools that you already have. For example, data that has been used to train AI, the business needs that you're trying to resolve with your AI systems, the outputs of the AI systems, the intended use of the outputs, and implications of inaccurate or biased outputs.
That's a lot. But I think, it can be helpful to leverage, all that you can, because as we sort of mentioned, things will continue to come.
Yeah.
I
To add
want,
something.
yeah, please.
I think so. At IAS, what we found, I mean, just documentation alone within an AI governance program is quite substantial, right? So, especially as you seek out the certifications and see all of the requirements around documentation. So, for us, it was an exercise of figuring out what policies and procedures exist that could just be extended to include AI specific components, right? So, if it's AI follows, creation of AI follows your change management program. How do you update those documents to state that it is inclusive of AI, right? Or where are there instances where you now need to create an AI policy, overarching policy, right? Like it's its own document. Or most companies have an existing risk assessment process. So really understanding the use case of AI in your environment and then adding in those additional risks to an already established risk assessment process. Or do you have such significant risk around AI that you need to create your own AI specific risk assessment that needs to be considered? I think really understanding AI in your environment and then figuring out how to add in clauses or create things that are new, just depending on, how much is there, how much it's nuanced or changed from something that already exists in your organization.
Yeah, I think in knowing your AI, right? Because there's so many different use cases, right? You have folks who are developing, some who are deploying it, so we're just using it internally. There's so many uh possibilities that you really have to think about how your organization is doing it. I'm going to share my screen here again, because can you all see that? Yeah, that works. Okay. In talking about our responsible AI certification, the sort of use case for a certification, I think you can use the certification in a couple ways. One of those is to do that assessment on your organization, right? So even if you're not at a maturity level that you want to be, it can be a tool that you use to figure out, well, what do we need to start working on? And also that report can sometimes help you get exec buy-in, because you can go demonstrate, like, look, we've got a lot of gaps, we've got a lot of risk, we need some resources, whether that be, financial people, et cetera, but we need resources. Anyway, I know that your organization has been TRUSTe certified for the Responsible AI Certification. And so why did Integral Ad Science decide to go that route, and share with us your experience?
Yeah, so we were already familiar with TrustArc. We've obtained other certifications with you, also worked with you on just some assessments of our alignment with frameworks or compliance with GDPR or the US data privacy framework. So we knew the quality of going through your processes and getting your feedback. So when we're looking for opportunities for AI certification, we looked at your TRUSTe Responsible AI certification and really liked the way it incorporated multiple sets of standards and frameworks, right? So when we were going through it, it gave us confidence that we were really looking at our compliance against a greater set of requirements. There was also a lot of discussion about how you continue to assess upcoming and new requirements and standards that are coming out. So it gave us confidence as we recertify in subsequent years, we'll continue to be assessed and compliant with the most up-to-date set of standards. Because again, the burden of everything coming at us, right, from a regulation and standards and requirements perspective, we do our best to keep up with it. But it's, again, always nice to have that external sounding board to make sure we've really considered everything that's out there that might be to our organization.
Well, I appreciate that, that you have that confidence in us. I do want to talk about sort of those that map. We do a lot of mapping here, I will say, because frankly, there is so much to map. But when we built the certification, one of the things we did is we looked at all manner of guidance, frameworks, standards. We looked at, there wasn't a lot of finalized legislation, but we looked at what was out there. We looked at a lot of draft legislation in various regions, looked at executive orders, industry standards, et cetera. And as you start to consume all of those, what I noticed is I would start to see patterns in these different frameworks and standards, regulations as well. And that's sort of how we came up with our framework for responsible AI. As you mentioned, we sort of continue to do that, right? We continue to track what's coming in, what laws have been passed, how are they different than what's out there, what do we need to add? Because we know that, in those slides I shared previously, there's that whole spoke of things that you have to consider. So if we could at least cover the AI portion, hopefully that is a helpful tool for you. But so that's what our AI certification is based on. Again, you get access to those operational templates that we built because we know that those resources are needed. It's a lot of work, especially if you've already put your data governance in place. That is always a continuing evolving area as well. So now you've got maybe multiple things. But like I said, it can also be used as a tool to get buy-in from executives if you just need to assess from the outset, right? Where you're standing and where you're at. So I want to thank our guests here, but let's see if we have some questions. We'll try to answer them. If you have any questions, please feel free to add them to the Zoom. So it's just in that chat there. All right, I'm going to start from the top, see what I missed. Okay. All right, I think I answered some of these. Could you elaborate a bit on specific problems for AI in healthcare? So I will take my best run at this, and if either of you have anything to add, please do. But I think one of the things with let's say HIPAA, right, is disclosure of data. So if you are subject to HIPAA, that's a difficult one to get around, right? Because then you have to bring in these other data protection things that you have to do, right? Do you have, not necessarily in a HIPAA, but do you have consent for that? There's also these data minimization principles, and secondary use principles. So that's, I think, a big concern. What would you all add?
I would say, use existing privacy regulations and other underlying requirements for this category and other categories as a guide when you build your, AI governance to ensure that you comply with them. You should already, organizations will already have, different inventories, different risk assessments. So this should all be helpful when building this.
Yeah. So I would also add, I think PHI, medical data, right, it's sensitive data. And so you have some issues there, of course, around security. Breaches can be a problem. But also that data could be incomplete. So I think, if you're training based on that data, there's possibly some problems there as well. Your, predictions are maybe inaccurate or maybe underrepresented groups. There's things like that. I think transparency might be a challenge. Yeah, those are some of my initial thoughts on healthcare, specific problems for AI in healthcare. All right. I'm going to ask our panelists a question that I am just thought of now. So we'll see how you do. What excites you about AI?
Ooh.
Whether that's in your industry, what about the work you're doing with AI is exciting?
I think it's the sky's the limit, right? So within our business, the use of machine learning models and all of that has been in play for years, right, within the digital ad measurement space. So I think seeing where we're able to take AI within our organization and evolve that to fill other gaps or perform other functions is somewhat exciting to me, but also at the same time daunting from a compliance perspective, right? So the burden on our compliance department to keep up with it, keep up with regulation, understand the use cases in our environment, and react to those timely. But it's also just a cool space that I think has only started to scratch the surface. So a lot to come.
And, really this, cross-departmental collaboration when you talk about AI, this so complex environment that, so many different teams are involved in working on it. And, there are so many uses that are so beneficial for everyone.
Yeah. So I'll answer my own question. I think what I'm excited about is the creative opportunities that it opens up. It's another tool with which to expand your learning, to expand what you do. And I think that's kind of exciting. And also, right, it's a little bit of job security for us, compliance, privacy, maybe. So that's pretty exciting. All right. Well, I want to again thank you, Jessica, for joining us, sharing with us your experience. I think a lot of companies are going through what you may have already gone through, and so to have folks who can come speak to sort of what they've done is really beneficial for all of us. I really appreciate you sharing that. And Maciek, thank you also for joining, sharing all your experience about governance and building those systems.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Appreciate you spending some time with us today.
Thank you so much. It's nice speaking with you.